resolution to waive section 62-2J6 of the Statesboro Code of Ordinances to allow for a maximum of 20% rental occupancy for development of Farm Hill Farm subdivision by L&S Acquisitions LLC. Tax parcel numbers MS 5700000400 and MS 5700000600 under the Subdivision Incentive Program. Mr. Penn.
Mayor, members of council, we have the housing incentive program, and it's been around for a number of years. But one of the things, as we're obviously concerned, is that with housing in our community, almost 65% of our housing tends to be tenant-occupied housing. So what we really want to do is create more ownership opportunities in the city of Statesboro. However, in order to incentivize local developers, there's a concern on the part of the local developers that they would be concerned that they build houses and then they sit there and they aren't able to sell them. And provision that says that for 1 year they cannot rent any of those units. And so, in looking at it and talking with potential developers, this was a major sticking point. We mentioned this at the retreat that we needed to look at setting some number that they would be able to at least get some of those houses occupied in that first year. And so we believe the percentage of 20% of those units would be a reasonable number. We would say to you that our plan is to look at the overall ordinance and to come back to you. But in the meantime, we have a project that has been approved for incentive grant. However, without this modification to the agreement, they're not going to move forward. And in our market, housing is a tight market, and single-family housing is a premium. And so with that, we recommend this modification to this agreement in order to be able to move forward with the incentive program and to get this project moving.
We'll open it up for council discussion. Seeing that there is none.
Mr. Penn, what processes do we have in place to ensure that only 20% of these houses would be rented? Do we have any processes? How do we monitor this? And are we doing anything like this?
Well, and I'm probably going to need Jason to help me out. This is the first time we've made this modification. And again, we don't just automatically give the developer the money right up front. And so that would be our best way to monitor that they comply with that 20% number. Again, the project that we're bringing forward to you is 80 lots. So in essence, you're talking about 20% would be 16 of those lots that would be allowed to be used for rental units. And so the best way, some of them are going to be dependent upon the developer to be a person of their word, but at the same time, we do have the provision that we pay them the money out, so we could hold back 20% of the money to ensure that for that 1 year that they complied with it. So there are some financial streams that we have that will be available to us.
And I'll add too that I don't believe this provision would be any more challenging to regulate on the city's part than it would be to say no rentals, period. I mean, it's the same challenge that we would have regardless. How do we regulate who's in there? So we're going to be faced with it either way.
Well, my point is, before we make the decision, shouldn't we at least consider how you're going to monitor this? I mean, I appreciate what you said there, but this idea that we're just going to take the word of our developers, I mean, historically speaking, and anybody in here, you know, if you don't write it down, they're not going to do it. It's just that easy. It doesn't matter if it's a tree, a sidewalk, or 20%. And so we have to have not only an agreement in place, but then we have to have a process in place to make sure that this happens. And we're trying to drive residential home ownership. And the fact of the matter is our neighborhoods are getting decimated by rentals. And they are. And our homeowners and the people that I represent, these are the people that live in the city. They're tired of these rentals making their neighborhoods go down. Everywhere else, property's going up. And these folks are hurting because we've got these rental properties and we're not protecting our homeowners. And I'm not against this, but I am concerned that we make a decision without putting a process in place, or even having talked
Well,
about it.
At the staff level, I mean, we can work through this to verify if it's owner occupied or rentals through the permitting and CO process, certificate occupancy process. And also the way this language is written, this will be in their covenants for the subdivision. So not only could the city regulate this, if you will, but the courts through the homeowners can do that as well.
Yeah, but
So
that's
the
why the
neighbors can
homeowners
help.
association is turned over to the homeowners. Lots of these homeowners associations stay in the developers' control until more than 90% of the houses are sold. If you only sell 80% of the houses, they never lose control of the homeowners association. It happens a lot. So I mean, there's details in here that I'm concerned about, that we're just like, hey, let's just build this, but we're not really thinking about how we're gonna manage it.
Well, again, Mr. Boyd, I believe it is really critical if, right now, we have a very tough housing market in Statesboro. And I understand you want us to put a process in place, and we can do that. But I do believe it is pretty critical, because we have this developer who's willing to go forward, and there's a business transaction that will not occur, and so it doesn't help us with the housing market if we don't at least get this project moving forward. I believe staff, we heard you, and we're not in any way ignoring your concern. We too have that same concern. And we will work with the developer, and again, the key, I believe, is the money that we control. The money that we control, that he's not gonna move forward without that $800,000 being there available to him. And so,
How do we hold that money back from them?
For me, this is policy that's on the paper that we're looking to amend. Operationally, I think that's something that staff need to have the opportunity to create. As a policy-making body, I think it's our task to create the policy, and then it's the staff task to create the operational side of it. So with that being said, I believe that the staff can create an operational procedure that will hold that developer accountable to that 20% tune, whether it's through the withholding of funds, whether it's through code enforcement, or somebody that we have within the organization. But I think today we're looking at policy. So with that being said, in my opinion, I think this is something that we need to go ahead and move forward, and then make sure the staff follow up with us as far as the procedure is concerned, as to how they will hold that developer accountable.
And I hear what you're saying, Mr. Mayor, but we're not setting policy here. We're making an exception for this developer. If we were setting policy, we wouldn't be
I
talking
didn't
about.
say setting policy, I said we're dealing with policy right now.
Okay, but that's my point. We're setting policy for a special situation, and we haven't considered the additional steps that need to be taken. And when we pass something like this, if the city and the developer don't have something already in writing, then we've committed to something without making them commit, is what I'm trying to say. The city has done this before. We don't sign MOUs or something like that, and then we can't roll back without an agreement in place. Just saying it's happened before, and I'm concerned in this situation again, that we have no mechanism to hold these people accountable.
Mr. Boyd, do you have a recommendation on some amendment?
I'd like to see a process or a thought and say, hey, if we give this, say, 20%, here's how we're gonna monitor it, here's how we're gonna do it, here's the penalty if you don't meet that 20%. Because again, I mean, I hear what you're saying with the homeowners association, but there are ways around that. I mean, the homeowners association isn't the end-all be-all if it's still owned by one person.
Do we need to table this for now and then and wait until the staff come back with a recommendation? Or do we wanna, what do we wanna do with this particular item? Do we wanna table it and say, staff, come back and tell us how you're gonna do it? Or do we wanna move forward and then have the staff follow up with us?
Because if we do this now, then everybody else is gonna want to do it too.
Come and do, say the same thing.
Again, and we'll do whatever council wants us to do.
Yeah.
I believe the money is the key to the key
And
to the whole thing.
as I understand it, it's the staff intent to bring this back to us anyway, in regards to making the amendment to that section. Am I understanding that correctly?
That is correct.
Yeah.
And again, we have one potential project
Mhm.
out of, last year, y'all approved the modification to the incentive program. We had, I believe we received 2 applications, and we moved forward with one of them. And so for a year, we've been sitting with this one possible development. And in the meantime, we haven't had any new housing, initiated single-family housing. We can table it for another 2 weeks, but again, we may end up losing, this deal may end up going by the wayside because there's someone that's selling this property to another potential developer, and so there's some back and forth between the 2 business folks. And this is one of the major sticking points, from the original developer to the person who's trying to acquire the property. I understand the concern. I do believe that the money, it will be the key to ensuring that they comply. Because we don't just write them a check for $800,000. They have to meet certain milestones. But they can't build those houses until the infrastructure's in place. And we can always say, we'll hold back a certain percentage of it, and if they don't comply with it, then they forfeit that amount of money that would ordinarily be available to them. The money is the hammer in this case.
If I could add one thing, this is solely a resolution in order to enter into the next agenda item, which is the developer agreement. And so it's not like we just waive it and say, here's the money, here you go. No, this is just solely in order for us to then enter into the development agreement that's in 10. When we're going against our own ordinances, we need to admit that openly through resolution, which is what we're doing here, and waiving that requirement under 622J, which prohibits all rentals for a period of 1 year. In this situation, we allow up to 20% rentals during that year for a minimum 1-year rental term. And all that is spelled out in the development agreement, which on the next item. So there are teeth to this because there is an enforceable agreement that has to be entered into before those funds can be expended to the developer. And the reason, and this is extremely limited in time and scope, in the resolution we specifically reference that this is due solely to current temporary conditions as to supply chain and housing market crunch. And in this situation, that's why we have this resolution to go against our own ordinance in order to enter into the development agreement in item 10.
Any further discussion by council? All right, seeing that there's no further discussion, is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All right, any opposed?
Okay,
All right, so is that 4-1 or 3-2?
4-1.
Okay, just want to make sure. All right, so we'll move down to the next item, item 10, consideration